day, everyone. We are the Group 4 and we are tasked to present to you the LOTUS case or the SS LOTUS France versus Turkey, which was judged last September 7, 1927. We will be presenting video clips which will give us more insights about the case, the limits of the international law, and after which we'll have our group discussion relevant to the case.
The Lotus case concerns a criminal trial which was the result of the 2nd of August 1926 collision between the SS Lotus, a French steamship or steamer, and the SS Bozkurt, a Turkish steamer, in a region just north of Edeleyn, Greece. As a result of the accident, 8 Turkish nationals aboard the Bozkurt drowned when the vessel was torn apart by the Lotus. On the 7th of September 1927 the case was presented before the Permanent Court of International Justice, the judicial branch of the League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations. The issue at stake was Turkey's jurisdiction to try Monsieur Demons, the French lieutenant on watch duty at the time of the collision. Since the collision occurred on the high seas, France claimed that the state whose flag the vessel flew had exclusive jurisdiction over the matter. France proffered case law, through which it attempted to show at least state practice in support of its position. However, those cases involved ships that both flew the flag of the same state. The court, therefore, rejected France's position stating that there was no rule to that effect in international law. The Lotus principle or Lotus approach, usually considered a foundation of international law, says that sovereign states may act in any way they wish so long as they do not contravene an explicit prohibition. The application of this principle, an outgrowth of the Lotus case, to future incidents raising the issue of jurisdiction over people on the high seas was changed by Article 11 of the 1958 High Seas Convention. The convention, held in Geneva, laid emphasis on the fact that only the flag state or the state of which the alleged offender was a national had jurisdiction over sailors regarding incidents occurring in high seas. The principle has also been used in arguments against the reasons of the United States of America for opposing the existence of the International Criminal Court (ICC).
This case was decided in the Permanent Court of International Justice in The Hague, Netherlands in 1927. It followed a collision between a French mail steamer, the Lotus, and a Turkish steamer, the Bozkurt, in the middle of the night in the Mediterranean Sea. There seems little doubt that the French ship was in the wrong. The Turkish ship was cut in two. 7 Turkish people died and 10 were rescued from the water by the French vessel, which then continued on its journey, ultimately docking in Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul, the capital of Turkey. Turkish authorities investigated and arrested the French lieutenant of the watch, a Monsieur Demont. France claimed that Turkey had no jurisdiction to do so because the collision had happened on the high seas, and that Monsieur Demont was on a French ship and therefore within French territory at the time of the collision. Turkey's position was that its laws allowed foreigners to be tried for crimes against Turks, provided they were arrested in Turkey. Resolving this dispute required the court to make some really fundamental judgments about how international law worked. Essentially what the court said was that each nation is a free agent, and each nation is therefore entitled to make any laws that it likes, provided those laws don't conflict with international laws which are binding on that nation. Specifically, the court said, international law governs relations between independent states. The rules of law binding upon states therefore emanate from their own free will, as expressed in conventions or by usages generally accepted as expressing principles of law. Restrictions upon the independence of states cannot therefore be presumed. All that is required of a state is that it should not overstep the limits which international law places upon its jurisdiction. Within these limits, its title to exercise jurisdiction rests in its sovereignty. The principle that each nation may make whatever laws it wishes, provided those laws don't specifically contradict a binding international law, is known as the LOTUS principle. It enshrines the fact that national sovereignty outranks international law. International law is not imposed on nations by some higher authority. It merely represents the agreements of individual nations and the community of nations as a whole about what restrictions they will accept in order to obtain the benefits of a stable and well-regulated international order.
The Permanent Court of International Justice, attached to the League of Nations, operated from 1920 until 1946, when it was replaced by the International Court of Justice. In the case of the SS Lotus, the court considered how national and international laws might intersect in a trial involving a high seas collision. Just after midnight on August 2, 1926, the French mail steamer Lotus was sailing past the island of Lesbos when it crashed into the Turkish collier Bozkurt, cutting it in two. Though the crews of both ships tried to rescue the victims, 8 of the 18 Turkish nationals on board the Bozkurt drowned. The Lotus then proceeded to the Turkish city of Constantinople, also called Istanbul. After investigating the incident, the Turkish police arrested the Lotus's first officer, Lieutenant Demon, and charged him with manslaughter. Demon argued that the Turkish courts had no jurisdiction over him, but the Istanbul Criminal Court overruled his objection. The court convicted both captains and sentenced them each to a short term of imprisonment. The French government immediately protested the arrest of Demon and demanded that the case be transferred to France. As a compromise, the Turkish and French governments agreed to transfer the case to the Permanent Court of International Justice in The Hague.
On August 2, 1926, there was a collision in international waters between two steamer ships, the French Lotus and the Turkish Bozkurt.
The French steamer was captained by Demons, a French citizen, and the Bozkurt by Hassan Bey, a Turkish citizen.
Upon the collision, the Turkish Bozkurt was cut in two and sank, killing 8 Turkish nationals on board.
The crew of the Lotus saved the 10 remaining crew from the wreckage and continued on their course to Constantinople, which is now modern Istanbul, Turkey.
Upon their arrival, the Turkish and French captains were both charged with manslaughter by Turkish authorities. Demons was placed under arrest to await trial for manslaughter without prior notice given to the French Consul General.
On August 28th, Demons was tried at the court of Istanbul. Demons raised the claim that the case was not within the Turkish court's jurisdiction. However, the claim was overruled by the court. Demons was released on a bail of 6,000 Turkish pounds on September 13th.
Finally, Demons was sentenced to 80 days imprisonment and a £22 fine. Turkish captain Hassan Bey received a similar sentence for the same charge.
The French government protested against Demons' arrest and demanded his release. Turkey and France then drew up an agreement in Geneva, thus bringing this case to the International Court of Justice.
The French argued against the Turkish jurisdiction of Demons' trial. They agreed that the Turkish captain ought to be prosecuted by a Turkish court, but argued that the French captain should be prosecuted by a French court.
Along with this, they argued that the French ship ought to be considered French territory. The French argued, therefore, that Turkey had violated international law because they had tried Demons.
In response to France, Turkey contended that both captains ought to be prosecuted by the same court, citing the close connection of the cases.
The court referred to international law precedent and found that there was no rule which would prohibit Turkey from prosecuting Demons simply because the offense had occurred on a French ship. The court supported the importance of the interconnectedness of the cases, stating that the elements were legally entirely inseparable. Therefore, this was a case of concurrent jurisdiction.
Ultimately, the question was, did Turkey violate international law by exercising jurisdiction on a crime committed by a French national outside of Turkey? To this question, the courts found that Turkey, by instituting criminal proceedings against Demons, did not violate international law.
The Lotus case has left an important legacy for public international law because of its consideration of principal issues such as jurisdiction and sovereignty.
The first principle established by the Lotus case is that a state cannot exercise jurisdiction outside of its state unless there is international law to the contrary. This means that jurisdiction is defined territorially.
The next principle is that a state may exercise its jurisdiction in its own territory even if there is no law permitting it and state's activity is limited only by prohibition.
Essentially, as long as there is no rule to the contrary, a state can do whatever it wants within its own borders. This has been referred to as the Lotus Principle and is considered a foundation of international law.
Okay, now we will have our group discussion on this case. Ma'am Leelani Corre will give us her inputs about the case, and that is to be followed by Ma'am Edeleyn Derecho and yours truly.
Good day, everyone. What did France say about this case? France said criminal proceedings against M. Demons, during which a collision occurred, belongs exclusively to France courts. France said Turkish authorities were wrong to prosecute M. Demons, and this therefore violated international law on jurisdiction. The French government wants reparation amounting to 6,000 Turkish pounds paid by the Turkish government. France furthermore argued that as the practice of international law of civilized nations, a state is not entitled to extend criminal jurisdiction of its courts to include the crime or offense committed by a foreigner abroad solely in consequence of the fact that one of its nationals has been a victim of the crime of offense. Putting it another way to reiterate this stance, international law does not allow a state to take criminal proceedings against the foreign offender by reason of the victim's nationality. Acts performed on the high seas in the relevance of criminal proceedings are subject to the courts of the nationality of the ship. Jurisdiction is given to the courts whose flag the vessel flies. Putting it another way, to reiterate this stance, international law recognizes the exclusive jurisdiction to the state of the vessel whose flag is flown. In court's judgment, they mention that this principle is not always universally accepted. The United Kingdom refused the United States for the extradition of John Anderson, a British seaman who had committed homicide on board an American vessel. The United Kingdom recognized the jurisdiction of the United States, but also mentioned the entitlement to exercise theirs. The nationality of the victim is not sufficient grounds to override the above rule. The act of the collision must be considered in the jurisdiction to which the ship applies. The jurisdiction cannot be transferred to the nationality of the vessel sunk. The fact that both ships are of different nationalities and collided together, jurisdiction cannot be transferred from one ship to another. There is no such agreement of international law to this effect. In order for a Turkish court to have jurisdiction, they should be able to point towards some form of international law on jurisdiction in favor of Turkey.
Okay. What did Turkey say? They argued to the court to give judgment in favor of the Turkish court. In addition to France's argument, Turkey responded inter alia that the place where the offense was committed was the SS Bozkurt flying the Turkish flag, and so Turkish courts have jurisdiction of the offense. A key argument, Article 15 of the Convention of Lausanne, 1923, allows Turkey jurisdiction whenever such jurisdiction does not come into conflict with the principle of international law. Turkey has jurisdiction, and therefore no reparation should be paid by the Turkish government to the French government. Um, on the judgment, there is no rule of international law that criminal proceedings occurring from collisions at sea are exclusively within the jurisdiction of the state on whose flag the vessel is flown. This therefore means, in answer to the questions asked to the court, Turkey has not violated principles of international law by instituting criminal proceedings against M. Demons. As such, there is no occasion to give judgment on reparation to France.
important notice for this case. After this case, a convention was signed at Geneva in 1958, the High Seas Convention, that specifically addressed jurisdiction on collisions in the high seas under Article 11. Article 11 in three paragraphs state, first, in the event of a collision at the high seas, no penal or disciplinary proceedings may be instituted against the master or any service person of the ship other than the flag state of the ship or the nationality of the person. Second, for disciplinary procedures, only the state issuer of a master's license has the ability to withdraw it, even if the holder of the license is not a national of the issuing state. No arrest or detention of a ship can be ordered by any authorities other than the flag state of the ship. Had this convention been in place before the time of the Lotus collision, the judgment of the PCI-J would have been different. Turkey would not have had the jurisdiction to institute criminal proceedings against M. Demons due to Article 11, Paragraph 1. The exact wording of Article 11 is also included in the Convention's successor, United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea of 1982, which is under Article 97. So, the principle, the Lotus Principle, in this case highlighted what is known as the Lotus Principle rather, in international law. This means that states can do as they wish unless it is made explicit that it is prohibited in international law. Everyone, I have the honor and I am happy to present to you our my group mates for this presentation. None other than Ma'am Leelani Corre and Ma'am Edeleyn Derecho. I am Caroline Davin Domingo. We hope that you learned something out from our presentation. Good day and God bless everyone.